The Human Centipede begins with a simple setup that quickly turns into something far more disturbing. The story follows Dr. Heider, a retired surgeon living alone in a remote house in the German countryside. On the surface, he appears calm, intelligent, even controlled. But his obsession is anything but. He doesn't want to heal people. He wants to connect them. The film introduces his experiment in a slow, clinical way. There's no rush, no dramatic buildup, just an unsettling sense that something deeply wrong is being planned in silence. Dr. Heider abducts 3 strangers and performs a surgical procedure that fuses them together in a single human chain. The concept alone is enough to make the film infamous, but what makes it worse is how methodical everything is presented. It's not chaos, it's precision. Every detail feels deliberate, every decision feels final, and that's what makes it so hard to watch. Unlike traditional horror films that rely on supernatural elements or fast-paced violence, The Human Centipede forces the viewer to sit with the idea itself. The horror isn't hidden. It's the concept, stripped down and made physical. Director Tom Six claimed the idea was built around a medically plausible concept, which only added to the controversy and public debate around the film's intent and realism. And then came the sequels. Each one pushed further than the last, expanding the scale and intensity of the original concept. Human Centipede 2 in particular gained notoriety for its extreme tone, to the point where it faced bans and heavy censorship in multiple countries before being partially released. But the legacy of the first film is what stuck, not because of what happens on screen, but because of what it represents. A simple idea taken to its most extreme conclusion. And once it enters your mind, it doesn't really leave. Zero Day looks like a simple story about 2 high school students documenting their lives. Andre and Cal aren't presented as anything unusual. They joke around, film themselves, talk about school, and complain about the same things most teenagers do. But something about the footage feels different. It's not polished. It's not cinematic. It's designed to look like something you could find on an old personal camera or a recovered home video. That alone makes it feel closer to reality than most films. And as the story continues, that sense of realism starts to shift into something more unsettling. Because Andre and Cal slowly begin to change. Their recordings become more focused, more deliberate. What once felt like casual filming starts to feel like documentation, like they're building towards something they already understand, even if the audience doesn't yet. The film gradually reveals that they are planning a violent attack on their school. But what makes Zero Day so disturbing isn't just what they plan to do, it's how normal they still feel while doing it. There are no exaggerated villains here, no obvious signs that something is wrong from the outside. Instead, the film shows how ordinary people can exist right next to something unthinkable, without it being visible until it's too late. That's what made the movie so controversial when it was released shortly after real-world tragedies involving school violence. Many viewers felt it came too close to reality, especially because of how closely it mirrors real video diary-style footage that had already begun appearing in the media at the time. It doesn't feel like watching fiction. It feels like watching something recorded before anyone knew what was going to happen next. And that's what makes it difficult to forget. When The Exorcist was released, it wasn't just another horror film hitting theaters. It became an event. People didn't just go to watch it, they went to experience it. And almost immediately, stories started spreading about audiences reacting in ways that nobody expected. Some fainted, some walked out. Others reportedly felt physically sick during certain scenes. But what makes The Exorcist stand out in this iceberg isn't only what happens in the film. It's what happened around it. During production, strange incidents began stacking up in ways that felt almost impossible to ignore. A fire broke out on set and destroyed large portions of the filming environment, forcing production to stop and rebuild everything from scratch. And yet, one key set, the bedroom used for some of the most important scenes, was reportedly left untouched. That detail alone became part of the film's long-lasting reputation. As filming continued, more accidents followed. Cast members suffered injuries during physically demanding scenes, including moments where practical effects went wrong and caused real harm. Some of these moments were even left in the final cut of the film, adding to its unsettling realism. Even outside the set, reports began circulating about unexpected tragedies affecting people connected to the production. Whether coincidence or not, the pattern was enough to create a lasting idea in the public mind that something about the film felt wrong. And over time, The Exorcist stopped being talked about only as a movie. It became a story about a movie that seemed to carry its own history of misfortune. Cannibal Holocaust is one of those films that doesn't just disturb audiences. It makes them question what they're actually looking at. On the surface, it follows a simple concept. A documentary crew travels into the Amazon rainforest to film isolated tribes. But when they disappear, a rescue team is sent in to recover their footage. And what they find is where the film takes a darker turn. The entire story is told through recovered recordings, shaky camera footage, fragmented scenes, and moments that feel far too real for comfort. From the beginning, the film commits fully to the idea that what you're watching might not be entirely fictional, and that's exactly why it caused such a huge controversy. When it was released, audiences and even authorities struggled to separate performance from reality. The realism of the footage was so convincing that the director was actually taken to court and forced to prove that no real human deaths had occurred during filming. In court, he had to demonstrate how certain scenes were created, even bringing in cast members to show they were still alive. But the controversy didn't stop there. The film also included real animal deaths on screen, which intensified public outrage and led to bans in multiple countries. For many viewers, this was the first time a movie felt like it had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. What makes Cannibal Holocaust important in this iceberg isn't just the shock value, it's the fact that it genuinely blurred the boundary between fiction and documentary so effectively that people stopped trusting what they were seeing. Even the structure of the film adds to that confusion. There's no clear separation between stage storytelling and found footage, which forces the viewer to constantly question what is real and what is constructed. The film stopped feeling like horror movies in the traditional sense and start feeling like something else entirely. A Serbian film opens quietly. We meet Milos, a retired adult film actor trying to live a normal life with his wife and child. He's left his past behind, or at least he thinks he has. But when a mysterious director offers him a high-paying project, everything starts to change. The job is simple on paper. One final performance. No details, no script. Just a promise of money that could solve all his financial problems. And that uncertainty is where the real tension begins. Because the audience knows something he doesn't. As Milos gets pulled deeper into the project, the film slowly reveals that this isn't just another production. It's controlled by people with extreme and disturbing intentions, using manipulation, drugs, and psychological pressure to push him beyond anything he ever agreed to. What makes this film so infamous isn't just its content. It's how far it goes in breaking the idea of consent, control, and power inside filmmaking itself. Everything in the story is designed to make the viewer feel trapped alongside the main character, with no way to step back from what's happening. As the narrative escalates, it becomes less about entertainment and more about endurance. Scenes are constructed to feel uncomfortable not just because of what they show, but because of what they imply about exploitation and human limits. When it was released, a Serbian film was heavily censored and banned in multiple countries. Even in places where it was allowed, it often came with severe cuts that changed the viewing experience entirely. Critics argued it crossed moral boundaries. Supporters claimed it was a metaphor for exploitation in the film industry and society itself. But regardless of interpretation, one thing was clear. This wasn't a film people simply watched. It was a film people reacted to. Megan is Missing feels almost normal. It's presented like everyday footage. Clips of teenagers talking, chatting online, hanging out, and recording their lives without much structure. Megan is outgoing, popular, and constantly connected. Amy is quieter, more cautious, and often just observing everything through her camera. But that contrast is exactly where the discomfort starts. Because the film slowly shifts its focus away from casual teenage life and into something far more unsettling. It begins with online conversations. Megan meets someone named Josh. He seems friendly, patient, and interested in her in a way that feels flattering at first. But there's one detail that stands out immediately. He never shows his face. Even so, Megan continues talking to him. And the more the conversations continue, the more the boundaries begin to blur between curiosity and danger. The film doesn't rush anything. It lets the situation unfold in a way that feels uncomfortably realistic, almost too familiar in how normal it all seems. Then Megan disappears, and the tone of the film completely changes. What follows is no longer about teenage life. It becomes a fragmented, unsettling search led by Amy, who starts recording her own video diaries as she tries to understand what happened to her friend. The footage feels increasingly unstable, as if the situation is spiraling out of control in real time. The most controversial aspect of the film is how it presents its final act. Not as a dramatic horror sequence, but as a collection of disturbing evidence and implications that feel closer to real-world cases than traditional storytelling. That's what made the film infamous. Not just the content itself, but how it mimics reality so closely that many viewers found it difficult to separate fiction from something that could actually happen. Released in 2011, Megan is Missing became widely discussed online, often described as one of the most disturbing, warning-style horror films ever made. Not because of monsters or supernatural elements, but because of how ordinary everything starts. At first glance, Threads doesn't feel like a horror film in the traditional sense. There are no monsters, no jump scares, no supernatural threat lurking in the dark. Instead, what it shows is something far more uncomfortable, a version of reality that feels disturbingly possible. The story follows ordinary people living in Sheffield, England, as political tensions between global superpowers slowly rise in the background. At the center of it all is a young couple, Ruth and Jimmy, who are simply trying to plan a normal life together. But the film isn't really about them. It's about what happens when everything around them stops working. When diplomacy collapses, warnings turn into sirens, and suddenly the world doesn't feel distant anymore. It feels immediate. And then it happens. A nuclear strike hits the city without warning. There's no heroic moment, no time to process it. Just a sudden flash, followed by silence breaking into chaos. What follows is where Threads becomes infamous. The film doesn't cut away from the aftermath. It stays with it. The destruction of infrastructure, the breakdown of society, the collapse of basic survival. Everything is shown in slow, brutal detail. Food becomes scarce. Communication disappears. Medical care stops existing. And the world doesn't recover. It just continues breaking down. What makes it even more disturbing is how ordinary everything starts. Because the contrast between normal life and complete collapse is what sticks with you long after it ends. There's no sense of cinematic distance. It feels less like watching a film and more like watching an outcome. And that's exactly why Threads still gets talked about today. Not because of what it shows, but because of how real it starts to feel when everything goes wrong. The line between fiction and reality starts to feel unstable, and the Guinea Pig series is one of the biggest reasons why. Created in Japan during the 1980s, this collection of films was designed with one clear goal: to make something so realistic that viewers would question whether it was even staged. There's no traditional storytelling structure here. No heroes, no clear plot, just short, disturbing scenarios that unfold with extreme focus on physical suffering and endurance. Each entry in the series presents a different scenario, but the most infamous is Flowers of Flesh and Blood. On the surface, it appears to show a man abducting a woman and subjecting her to a slow, methodical act of violence. What made it so controversial wasn't just what was shown. It was how convincing it looked at the time. The practical effects, makeup, and camera style were all designed to remove the distance between viewer and fiction. There's no cinematic exaggeration, no obvious visual cue that what you're seeing is staged. It's presented in a cold, documentary-like way that feels intentionally uncomfortable. That realism had real-world consequences. At one point, the film was so convincing that it sparked concern outside the horror community, including reports that even industry professionals questioned whether it depicted real violence. This confusion eventually escalated into official scrutiny, forcing the creators to publicly demonstrate how the effects were achieved. The truth behind it was simple. Everything was staged. But the reaction it caused proved how effective the illusion had become. Before streaming platforms, before internet shock compilations, and before the idea of extreme content became easy to find, there was Faces of Death. Released in the late 1970s, it presented itself as a documentary, a raw exploration of death from around the world. But what made it so infamous was the way it blurred the line between real footage and staged reconstruction. From the very beginning, the film is framed like an educational experience. A calm narrator guides you through each segment, almost like a scientific study of mortality. But what you're actually watching quickly becomes much harder to define. Some scenes are clearly staged recreations, others are not so easy to place, and that uncertainty is exactly what made it legendary. The film includes a mix of autopsy footage, accident scenes, and highly controversial moments that were presented in a way that made audiences constantly question what was real. At the time, there was no easy way to verify what you were seeing, which added to the psychological impact. One of the most disturbing elements wasn't a single scene. It was the structure itself. The film doesn't build toward a story. It simply presents death, again and again, in different forms, stripping away emotional distance until the viewer is left with nothing but discomfort. Because of its presentation, Faces of Death became one of the most controversial home video releases of its era. It was banned in several countries and heavily debated in media circles, with critics arguing about whether it exploited real suffering or simply simulated it for shock value. At the deepest level, things stop feeling like cinema altogether. There's no structure, no studio, no clear author, just fragments of something the internet was never really meant to archive. The idea of internet snuff doesn't refer to a single film. Instead, it describes a category, or more accurately, a rumor-driven collection of videos that circulate through hidden corners of forums, message boards, and file-sharing sites. Unlike traditional horror films, there's no production design here. No actors, no scripts, no clear intention behind what you're watching. Just low-quality recordings that appear to show real events. And that's exactly what makes them so controversial. Because in most cases, there's no way to confirm authenticity. Some clips are later proven to be staged, part of urban legends or shock experiments designed to test how far people will believe what they see online. Others are tied to real-world incidents but are stripped of context, making them even harder to interpret. And a few remain completely unverified to this day. What defines internet snuff isn't a single title or creator. It's the uncertainty itself. The viewer is left in a constant state of doubt. Is this real? Is this staged? Or is it something that should have never been uploaded in the first place? This uncertainty is what pushes it to the bottom of the iceberg. Unlike earlier entries, there's no cinematic framing to distance the viewer from what's happening. No soundtrack, no narrative, just raw, often incomplete footage that spreads through the internet like digital folklore. Over time, entire communities formed around identifying, debunking, or archiving these clips. Some treat them like mysteries to solve. Others treat them as warnings about the darkest corners of online culture.